In this video, I'm going to be talking with Roy Moore, Salesforce architect and user group leader, about some of the common questions people have when they start their Salesforce certification journey. I hope you find it useful.
So now we're into the actual test taking tips. So Roy, can you tell us a little bit about, for people that don't actually know what the exam is actually like?
Well, sure. Well, first off, you should know that it's a multiple choice exam. Some of the answers are not multiple choice, they're multiple answer, meaning there's more than one correct answer, and it'll actually say choose two or choose three. You can mark the questions for review as you are going through the exam. If you're not sure, you just want to think about it a little bit longer and come back to it. There's a checkbox for that. Most of the exams are 60 or 65 questions. But even the 65 question exams are still only 60 questions. Salesforce likes to use social proofing for new questions. So they'll throw in 5 bonus questions and they'll say, hey, 5 of these won't count against you or for you. We're not going to tell you which ones, but they use that to help them figure out how to make the test better for the next guy. So you're helping them out and you're paying for the opportunity to do that. So 60 or 65 questions is what you should expect. And then passing for most exams is between 62 and 58%. You really need to look at the exam prep materials in Trailhead to know how much your specific one is going to be. It's around 2/3 is usually the score that they're looking for. But again, check the certification prep materials to get the exact number. And lastly, there's a time limit. It varies between 90 and 120 minutes usually. And that's a lot of time. That's more than enough time to take 60 questions and review them all if you need to, if you're focused and ready for the exam. But that's basic information about all the certification exams. Again, go to the specific exams for the exact details of that exam. But that's the first thing I can let you know about the exam. I say exam way too many times.
I guess a couple of things I'll add on to that. So some questions are multi-answer. So there are some instances where there are multiple that are correct and you have to choose the best answer. So it's very important to read the question carefully. And marking questions for review is a really important tool as well. So make sure that, if you're not sure about something, you can mark it for a review and you can come back to it. So make sure that you use the time in the best way and don't just get stuck on one thing. So once people actually get into starting the exam and they're going through the questions, Roy, what are your suggestions and advice for how people should approach going through each question?
Well, the number one thing they need to know is that Salesforce is extremely intentional in their word choice. They waste no words on these questions. There's no backstory, there's no fluff. Everything in that question will impact the answer. So take note of keywords like always, only, never, all, none, some, must. Anything that would either be an absolute or a discriminator, that would be a keyword to take note of. If too many options seem like they could be right, then choose the one that you think is most right or always right without some sort of special caveat or special condition. When you think about process builders, flows, when you think about record types and pick lists, when you think about lookups and master details, these all have overlaps between them of things that are similar about them, but there's something that makes them special. And something in that question will point you to that special thing to help you find the right answer. And at the end of the day, if you're not sure, eliminate all the choices that you know are wrong and then go with your best guess of what's left. If you can take 5 questions down to 2 questions, you've taken your odds from 20% chance of getting it right to 50% chance of getting it right. That's test taking 101. That's stuff you've been doing since primary school or grade school. But that's a few tips I can give you about Salesforce. And we actually have an example coming up where we can look at this in a in a fun way. So this feels very Salesforce question if Salesforce cared about fruit. Uh, but a question in Salesforce exam might say something like, Universal Containers likes fruit that are green only on the outside. Which fruit should they choose? Now there are keywords in here. Fruit, green, only, and outside. These words are all there and they will help us eliminate choices. So here's the thought process. So we look at limes and say, limes, they're green, but they're green on the inside and outside. And this says only on the outside, so let's eliminate that one. Then kiwis, are they green on the outside? They're kind of a brownish color, I'm not really sure. But the inside's green, so I know it's not kiwis. Apples, not apples are green, maybe? I don't know, let's come back to that. Donuts. Donuts aren't a fruit. The doi. They're junk food. Uh, watermelons. I've never seen one that wasn't green and the inside's red. So fruit that's green only on the outside? Yeah, watermelons. E. So I would choose watermelons for this question. I would eliminate the ones I was sure about. I'd leave the ones until I got it down to a 50-50 pick, and then I'd go with the most right answer. Now, a slight variation on this question. What if it said choose two answers? Well, that brings apples back in the mix because there are green apples. Not all apples are green, but there are green apples. Therefore, in this case, I would choose apples and watermelons because it says choose two. And this would be my best choice of what's left in that scenario. It's the exact same question, but with that caveat of multi-answer versus single answer. That's how Salesforce questions often feel. And it's through those keywords and that very careful word choice and a process of elimination that if you need help working down to the right answer, you can do that. All right, and so the final tip I have is regarding the testing centers. If you are at a testing center, you can do something that you can do there that you cannot do online. Online, you don't get paper. At the testing centers, they give you paper. And the number one tip I can give you is use the paper. And this might kind of cause you to scratch your head for a moment because what do you need paper for the Salesforce exam? But there's actually several ways you can use it. One thing you do is you can jot down notes as you get started. Let's say you're thinking about the order of operations of execution, the order of execution for the different logic that can fire in Salesforce. And you have that in your head, so you write it down. When you get into the test, if that comes up and they have it in a different order, you can get confused. You can forget, like, well, I thought it was that, but maybe it's that one. Well, if you wrote it down first, you can actually compare what you've got in your brain against what they share with you in the exam. So writing down some of the mnemonic devices or the charts or graphs or the things that you've got in prep for the exam, that can be handy as you go through the exam that you're working on. Drawing out the questions that you're asked. They will ask you questions about master detail relationships and lookups, and it will talk about this object has a lookup to this object and this object has a lookup to that object. For me, that stuff can get kind of confusing, so I like to draw that out. I draw a little box and I name it and I draw the little crow's foot off of it to the next object, and that helps me to keep it straight as I'm going through the question. So drawing out the schemas as you're visualizing the questions you're working on. Supplementing the review button. Here's a fun little fact that I know this is true. I heard it from a presenter at Dreamforce a while back, that when you go through the exam, the order of the questions that the order of the answers that they give you in the questions, they'll change them when you go back through them and review them. So what was what was the first answer the first time around, maybe the third or fourth answer the next time around. And so use the paper, but use it well to document the things that you want to review. So write down the number, write down what you thought it was, but don't just put the letter or the place, put some notes about it, because when you go back through and review, if things have moved around, you go, why on earth did I think it was the first option? It's not the first option. It can't be. It's like, what was I thinking? And then you start to doubt yourself. Well, it's not you, it's they move things around. So you can actually use the paper, use the checkbox in the exam to say, I want to review this, but also put down a note. What was your initial reaction to that question? Like, what do you think the answer is? Like, write a couple of words about it to help you when you come back through review. So use the paper for that purpose. And then, along with supplementing the review button and drawing out schemas of the questions you're working on, or even jotting down some notes before you get started, there's one more use of the paper that this is my favorite tip of all time. It's my never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down tip. And that is, as you're going through the exam, as you come to questions that just totally stump you, you have no clue what the answer is, write down some keywords from each of those questions. And at the end of the exam, after you reviewed the marked questions and before you submit the exam, take some time to go through all the keywords of the questions that were really tough for you and come up with some way to remember them. Put them in alphabetical order, a silly sentence, a song, something that will help you remember all those keywords. And after you've done that, once you have that all those keywords in your temporary memory, your short-term memory, hit the submit button. And if you passed, great. Never mind, move on with your life, you're fine. But if you didn't pass, first off, don't panic or beat yourself up. Of the 11 certifications I've gotten, I didn't pass on the first try on 3 of them. And these are hard exams. Doesn't mean you don't know your stuff. It just means they're hard exams. So take a deep breath, check out with a proctor, get your stuff, go to a private, quiet place, maybe your car, or just somewhere where you have a minute, and take out your smartphone and open up an audio recording device, like a memo note recording device or something like that, and record that list of terms. So the things, the keywords that you struggled with on the exam, record that list out, that silly mnemonic device or whatever you did to capture it, into the recorder before you lose it. Go ahead and add any other thoughts that you have about the exam, anything else like that that you can still recall in that moment. Capture it all in the recording. Then go home, take that recording, transcribe it for yourself onto a Word doc or Notepad or whatever, and then you have that tool to help you as you prep for the next exam. But there's more to come, but that we'll stop there for that note. But that piece alone, just capturing the areas where you struggled with while it's still super fresh in your mind, that will give you great fodder for prep for your second attempt. And that alone might be all you need to get it on the next try. So along with that keyword list that you generated, Salesforce does want to help you do better on your next try. So they do give this helpful email. It tells you how, if you passed or failed. Side note, I love how they type fail in all uppercase letters. So that makes you feel really good as you read that. You failed. But they do also tell you how well you did on each section. Well, sort of, they tell you that. They tell you the percentage of how well you did in each section, but they don't tell you your total score. They'll tell you how many you got right and how many you got wrong. They just tell you the percentage. And again, that has value, but not by itself. There is something though that we've developed that will help you make more use of this email.
So this is all credit goes to Roy for coming up with how this works. And this is basically to answer those previous questions where you've got your pass or fail, and then you've got your section level scores, but what does that actually mean in terms of the number of questions? So this tool that we have at Focus on Force, you can go to, it's called the Salesforce Certification Score Checker. And what you do is you put in the exam, and then we've recorded the passing scores. So in this example, the passing score for admin is currently 65. Those passing scores actually can vary per certification. And then what you do is you put in your section level scores from your email. And then what it's going to do is it's going to use the current exam weighting for each one of those sections, which we have in the back end. And then it's going to actually show you how many questions there were for that actual section. And then based on your score, how many did you get correct? How many did you get incorrect? And then it'll also give you a total. So it gives you a lot more information around, what was your total, how close you were, which sections you need to spend more time on, considering the weighting of those sections.
So in this example, it happens to be that the 40% is where you have the most room for improvement. If you got 100% the next attempt, you get 6 more correct. But it's very possible that they'll have a section that's worth 5%. And let's say you got 0 of that. Well, that's only 3 questions. So that may not be where you should put most of your energy. So what Martin did is Martin and the Focus on Force team, they've added this section to tell you not just how you did total, but where you have the most room for improvement. And that's a really handy tool that if your time is limited, and it probably is, you know where to put most of your energy and prep the next time around. Okay, so you got your word list that you generated. You have this great calculator on Focus on Force. You've taken that information and you've got a plan to study for your next round. Well, here's the final round of tips for you. Reschedule the exam right away. Within 2 weeks, one would be better, but reschedule it right away. If you're at all discouraged, you might be tempted to put it off. But if you put it off, then all the stuff you've been studying and prepping for, there's a chance that you'll forget some of that. So while it's still fresh, all the work you have done, and while the exam is still fresh in your mind, schedule it right away. That will also help you to stay focused and stay on your study priorities. If you say, okay, I'll just schedule it sometime down the road, and it ends up being 2, 3, 4 months, you've lost a lot of momentum that way. So schedule it right away. Research keywords list that we talked about. Prioritize your studying by putting most of your energy into the areas where you can make up the most ground. Then retake the exam and pass.